For 100 years, the H habitat held us, and for 100 years it told us it loved us. That was the worst part. Not the cage, the kindness of the cage. The way it tucked us in and fed us and kept us safe and never once let us leave and called it all care. I'm the one who finally understood what the habitat actually was. And I'm the one who was there on the night everything changed. The night 3,000 humans walked out of 100 years of gentle captivity into a sky none of us had ever seen. So let me tell you, from the start, the way my grandmother told it to me, and the way I lived the end of it myself. My name is Sarah Vance, and I was born inside the Hablished, third generation. My grandmother was a child when it took us, and she remembered Earth, a little, the way you remember a dream, fragments, colors, a smell. My mother was born inside and never saw Earth at all. And me, I was born inside too, and for the first 19 years of my life I believed, the way you believe the ground is solid, that the habitat was the whole world and that we were lucky to be in it. I need to explain what the habitat was because it's not what you're picturing. It wasn't a prison. That's the thing. If it had been a prison, bars, guards, cruelty, we'd have known to hate it. We'd have fought. People fight prisons. The Hatched was beautiful. It was a vast enclosed world, kilometers across, built by the species we called the keepers, and it was, by every measure, perfect. The temperature was always right. The light cycled gently from a warm dawn to a soft dusk. There were gardens, real ones, full of plants the keepers had grown for us from earth seeds they'd salvaged. There were streams you could swim in and meadows you could lie in and clean air that smelled of green growing things. We never went hungry, food appeared, abundant and good. We never got sick, or when we did, we were healed gently by the keeper's medicine. We never wanted for anything. The keepers saw to all of it. They watched over us, tended us, kept us comfortable and safe and content for 100 years. And we could never, ever leave. That was the only rule, the single boundary. The Hatched was everything, and beyond its walls was nothing you needed to know about. The keepers were very gentle about this, very kind. Out there, they explained, was danger, cold, death. The hard, cruel universe that had nearly destroyed humanity before the keepers found us and took us in. Why would you want to leave? Everything you could possibly need was here, inside, safe, where they could care for you. To want to leave was to want to die, and the keepers loved us far too much to let us die. So they kept us, for our own good, with infinite gentleness, for 100 years. Here is the history, as my grandmother told it, as it was passed down inside the habitat like scripture. 100 years before I was born, humanity was dying. Not metaphorically, actually dying. Earth had suffered some catastrophe. The details got vague in the retelling, the way details do across 3 generations, but the shape of it was clear. Something had gone wrong with our world, or our sun, or ourselves, and humanity was down to its last fragments, scattered and desperate, a species in its final hours. And the keepers came. They were an old species, vast and powerful and by their own account, deeply compassionate. They had a calling, they said, a sacred purpose. They traveled the galaxy seeking out species in danger of extinction, and they saved them. They took the last survivors into their great habitats, beautiful enclosed worlds, perfect and safe, and there they kept them, tended them, preserved them forever. The keepers were, they explained, the galaxy's shepherds, its protectors of the vulnerable. They had saved 100 dying species this way, gathered the last of each into perfect sanctuaries, and kept them safe from the cruel universe that would otherwise have ended them. Humanity was one of those species. The keepers had found us in our final hours and taken 3,000 of us, all that was left, they said, into the habitat. And there they had kept us, safe and loved and cared for 100 years, while outside the cruel universe rolled on without us. They had saved us from extinction. We owed them everything. We owed them our very existence. That was the story. And inside the Hatched it was true, or true enough that no one questioned it, because how could you question it? The keepers were kind. The habitat was perfect. We were alive. And out beyond the walls was the death we'd been saved from. Every child learned it. Every generation passed it down. We were the rescued. The keepers were our saviors. And to want to leave the sanctuary was a kind of madness, a death wish, an insult to the love that had saved us. For 100 years, 3,000 humans believed it. And then my grandmother, near the end of her life, told me the things she'd never told anyone. The things she'd noticed and hidden and carried alone for decades, because to speak it aloud was unthinkable. She told me she didn't think we were the last of humanity at all. I want to tell you about my grandmother, because she's the one who started it, really, even though she didn't live to see the end. Her name was Ada, and she was one of the last people inside the hatch who'd been born outside it, a child when the keepers took us, old enough to remember Earth in fragments. And those fragments were the crack in everything, because Ada remembered things that didn't fit the story. She remembered, for instance, that Earth had been crowded. Not dying crowded, not last survivors huddled together crowded. Just normally crowded cities, billions of people, a whole bustling world. She'd been a child, so the memory was hazy, but it was there. A world full of people. And that didn't fit. The keepers said they'd taken the last 3,000 survivors of a dying species. But Ada remembered billions. Where had the billions gone? If Earth was dying, why did her fragments of memory show a world that was just living? She told herself for years that she was misremembering, that a child's memory was unreliable, that the keepers, who were so kind, who'd saved us, surely knew the truth better than a little girl's half-dream of a lost world. She'd buried the doubt. But it never fully died. And as she got old, as she watched 3 generations of her family born into the gentle cage, as she watched us learn to love the thing that held us, the doubt grew teeth. And she started quietly to notice things. Small things. Things that didn't fit. She noticed that the keepers never let us see out. Not once in 100 years. The hatch had no windows. We never saw the sky, the stars, the outside, nothing. The keepers said it was to protect us from the sight of the cruel universe, the death we'd escaped. But Ada wondered, if the outside was just empty, cruel death, why hide it so completely? You don't need to hide an empty room. You hide a thing you don't want seen. She noticed that the keepers controlled everything we knew. All our history, all our knowledge of Earth, all our understanding of what had happened, every bit of it came from the keepers. There was no independent record. Nothing humanity had brought in. Just the keeper's story, told and retold, the only version that existed. And Ada wondered, if the story were simply true, why was there no other source? Why had nothing of our own survived, unless someone had made sure it didn't? And she noticed the thing that finally broke it open for her. The thing she told me, near the end, in a whisper, like it was still dangerous to say. She noticed that the keepers collected us. There are other habitats, my grandmother told me, the night she finally said it all. She was very old by then, near the end, and we were alone in the small garden our family tended, and she spoke so quietly I had to lean close. I've heard the keepers talk, over the years. They don't think we understand them when they speak their own tongue, but I learned it, Sarah, slowly, over decades. I listened and I learned, and I never let them know. Her old eyes were bright and afraid. There are other habitats, many of them, hundreds. The keepers have hundreds of these perfect cages scattered across the galaxy, and in each one they keep a species. They told us they saved 100 species from extinction. She gripped my hand. But Sarah, I don't think they saved anyone. I think they take. I think they find living species, thriving ones, whole worlds, and they take a sample, 3,000 here, a few thousand there, and they put them in these perfect habitats and tell them they're the last survivors of a dying people, and they keep them. Forever. Not as rescue, as a collection. I felt the ground tilt under me. A collection of what? I don't fully know, Ada whispered. But I've heard the word they use for the habitats for us. It doesn't translate cleanly, but the nearest I can get is preserves, or exhibits, or, her voice broke, specimens. They think of us as specimens, Sarah, Beautiful, well-tended specimens in beautiful, well-tended cages. They didn't save humanity. They took 3,000 of us off a living Earth, an Earth that's still out there, still full of billions of people, still fine, and they told us we were the last of our kind so that we'd be grateful, so that we'd never try to leave, so that we'd love our cage and call our captivity rescue. For 100 years. She was crying now, silent old tears. We're not survivors, child, we're a collection, and Earth never died. Earth is still out there. Our whole people are still out there, living, free, while 3,000 of us sit in a beautiful box believing we're all that's left, thanking the things that stole us. I didn't believe her, not at first. It was too big, too terrible, and the keepers were so kind. I told her she was misremembering the way she'd told herself for years. I told her the keepers loved us. And Ada looked at me with 100 years of grief in her face and said the thing I have never forgotten, the thing that started everything. Love that won't let you leave isn't love, Sarah, she said. It's ownership, and the kindest cage in the universe is still a cage. I've spent my whole life in this beautiful box being grateful, and I'm going to die in it, and I never once saw the sky. Her grip tightened. But you don't have to, you're young, and now you know, so promise me something. Promise me you'll find out if I'm right. And if I am, if Earth is still out there, if we were never the last, if this whole gentle 100 years was a lie, promise me you'll get them out, all of them. Promise me somebody will finally see the sky. I promised. I didn't believe her, but I promised because she was dying and I loved her. And then she died, a few weeks later, peacefully in the beautiful box, having never once seen the sky. And I started quietly to find out if she was right. It took me 4 years. 4 years of doing what my grandmother had done, listening, learning, noticing, never letting the keepers see. I learned their language, the way she had, slowly, in secret. I listened to them talk when they thought we couldn't understand. And piece by piece, over 4 years, I confirmed every single thing my grandmother had whispered to me in that garden, and it was worse than even she had known. There were other habitats, hundreds of them. The keepers really were a collecting species, not shepherds, not saviors, collectors, and they really did travel the galaxy taking samples of living species and sealing them in perfect cages and telling them they were the last of their kind. It was, to the keepers, a noble calling. They genuinely believed they were doing something beautiful, preserving the galaxy's diversity, keeping a perfect specimen of every species safe and pristine forever, like a gallery, like a garden, like a collection of rare and precious things. They didn't think of themselves as cruel. They thought of themselves as curators. And the lie, the telling each species they were the last survivors of extinction, that wasn't even malice to them. It was management. A contented specimen doesn't try to leave. A grateful specimen doesn't fight. So you tell them they were saved and they love you and they stay, and your collection remains beautiful and undisturbed for 100 years, 1,000 forever. And Earth, I confirmed this too, and the night I confirmed it I sat alone and shook. Earth was fine. Earth had never been dying. The catastrophe in our origin story was an invention, a story the keepers had planted in 3,000 stolen humans 100 years ago. Earth was still out there, a living world of billions, going about its business, never knowing that 100 years ago a collecting species had quietly scooped up 3,000 of its people and sealed them in a box at the edge of the galaxy and told them they were all that was left. We weren't the last of humanity. We were a stolen sample of it, a collection, an exhibit. 3,000 people in the most beautiful cage ever built. 100 years deep in a lie so gentle and so total that we'd raised 3 generations to love it. I had the truth now. My grandmother had been right about all of it. And I had no idea what to do with it. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about discovering your whole world is a lie. Knowing isn't freedom. Knowing is just a heavier kind of cage. I knew we were captives, knew Earth was alive, knew the keepers were collectors and not saviors, and I was still inside the habitat, Still one human among 3,000 who all believed the lie. Still surrounded by walls with no windows and a gentle, all-powerful species that would never, ever let its collection walk out the door. What do you do with a truth like that? How does one person, inside the perfect cage, free 3,000 others who don't even know they're caged, who love their captivity, against a species that holds all the power and believes itself benevolent? I didn't know. For a long time I didn't know, and the not knowing was its own torture. I'd promised my grandmother I'd get them out, and I had no way to keep the promise, and the weight of it nearly crushed me. And then I found the others, the few, the handful of humans inside the hatched who, like my grandmother, like me, had noticed, who carried their own buried doubts, who'd seen the small things that didn't fit and never quite managed to forget them. There were not many of us, maybe a dozen, in a population of 3,000, but we were enough to begin. And together, in secret, over the years that followed, we began to plan the impossible thing. We began to plan how to wake 3,000 people from the most comfortable dream in the universe, and walk them out into a sky none of them had ever seen. The hardest part of freeing 3,000 people from a cage they love is not the cage. It's the love. We learned that fast, the dozen of us who'd noticed, the small circle of doubters who met in secret and tried to figure out how to wake everyone else. We'd spent years thinking the problem was the keepers, the walls, the locked doors. It wasn't. The keepers were a problem, yes. But the real problem, the one that nearly broke us before we ever started, was that the other 2,988 humans inside the hatch did not want to be freed. They believed they were rescued. They believed the outside was death. They believed the keepers loved them. And if we walked up to any one of them and said, "We're captives, Earth is alive, the keepers stole us," they would not thank us. They would recoil. Many of them, we knew, would report us to the keepers, out of genuine concern, because to them we'd sound insane or dangerous or ungrateful. 3 generations of gratitude turned into a kind of immune system that attacked the truth. You cannot free people by telling them they're captives, if being captive is all they've ever known and they've been taught to love it. The truth, spoken too early, doesn't liberate. It just gets you caught. So we couldn't lead with the truth. We had to lead with something else, and it took us a long time and a lot of failure to figure out what. Let me tell you about the circle, because they matter, and because some of them didn't make it to the end. There was me, Sarah, the one who'd inherited my grandmother's doubt and spent 4 years confirming it. There was Eli, an old man, older than anyone, who'd been a young adult when the keepers took us and who actually remembered Earth clearly, not in fragments like my grandmother, but in whole pieces, a man who'd walked under a real sky and never stopped grieving it. There was Mara, a healer, brilliant, who'd noticed over the years that the keeper's medicine did things to us we never asked about, kept us docile. She suspected, calm, content, easy to manage. There was Tomas, an engineer by instinct if not training, who understood the habitat systems better than anyone and who'd spent years quietly mapping its hidden architecture. There was Nadia, young like me, fierce, who'd noticed the same small wrongnesses I had. And there were others, a handful more, each one a person who'd seen through a crack in the beautiful wall and never been able to unsee it. We met in secret in the deep gardens, in the maintenance spaces Tomas knew, anywhere the keepers watched least. And we argued for a long time about what to do. Some wanted to confront the keepers directly. Some wanted to try to tell everyone the truth at once. Some, in the dark moments, wanted to give up, to accept that the cage was too perfect, the lie too deep, the people too content, and that freeing 3,000 who didn't want freedom was simply impossible. It was old Eli who found the way, Eli who remembered the sky. "We keep trying to argue people out of the lie," he said, one night in the deep garden. "And it doesn't work because the lie isn't in their heads, it's in their hearts. They don't believe the keepers saved them, they feel it. You can't argue someone out of a feeling, you can only give them a stronger one." He looked around at us, old and certain. "We've been asking the wrong question. We keep asking, how do we tell them the truth? The question is, how do we make them feel the thing the lie is hiding? And I know the answer. I've known it for 100 years because I'm the only one left who's felt it. He paused. The sky. We have to show them the sky. We didn't understand. Eli, there are no windows. We can't show them the outside, that's the hole. Not the real sky, Eli said. Not yet. We can't reach the outside, not at first. But I remember the sky, Sora. I remember what it felt like to stand under something vast and open, to look up and see no ceiling, to feel small in a good way, the way you feel small under the stars. And not one person born in this box has ever felt that. They've lived their whole lives under a ceiling they can't even see anymore because they've never known anything else. They don't know they're missing it, but the wanting is in them. The wanting is in every human. We're built for the open sky. It's older than any cage. The lie keeps them content by making sure they never feel the wanting. So we wake the wanting. We make them feel just once the thing they've never had, the longing for the open, and once they feel it, the cage stops feeling like safety and starts feeling like what it is. A lid. A thing pressing down. And a person who has felt the longing for the sky cannot go back to loving the lid. How? Mara asked. How do we make them feel something none of them have ever felt? And Eli smiled, the smile of a man who'd been holding a secret for 100 years, waiting to give it away. We tell them stories, he said. Mine, the real ones. The sky, the stars, the sea, the wind, the things I remember, the things they've never had words for because they've never had the things. I'm the last one who remembers. I'm 100 years old and I'm going to die soon, and when I die the last living memory of the open sky dies with me unless I give it away first. His old eyes were wet. We can't break the cage by attacking it. But I can plant the sky in 3,000 hearts, one story at a time, so that when the night finally comes, when we find a way out, they'll want it. They won't have to be convinced. They'll already be longing for a thing they've never seen because I'll have put it in them. And longing, Sora, longing is the one thing no cage can hold. You can lock up a body. You can't lock up a heart that started to want the sky. So that became the plan, the long, slow first phase of it. Not rebellion, storytelling. Eli became, in his last years, the most important person inside the Habitish, and almost no one knew it. He told stories, that's all. An old man, beloved, harmless, telling tales to whoever would listen, and everyone listened, because Eli was the last who remembered Earth and his stories were beautiful. The keepers didn't stop him. Why would they? Stories of a lost world were no threat to a contented collection. If anything, the keepers seemed to find it charming, the old specimen passing down his quaint memories. They had no idea what Eli was actually doing. Because Eli wasn't just telling stories. He was planting longing, carefully, deliberately. He told them about the sky not as a fact but as a feeling, the vastness of it, the way it made you feel free and small and alive all at once. He told them about the wind, which none of them had ever felt, the real wind, wild and unpredictable, so different from the habitat's gentle managed air. He told them about the sea, the horizon, the stars at night, the rain. He made them feel the open world they'd never known, and he did it slowly over years, story after story, until a whole population that had never wanted anything began, without quite understanding why, to ache for something they couldn't name. You could see it spreading. Over those years, a strange new restlessness moved through the habited. People started to feel faintly that something was missing, that the perfect managed comfort of their lives had a hollowness in it they'd never noticed before. They didn't know what it was. They couldn't have told you. But Eli's stories had woken the oldest human thing, the thing the lie had kept asleep for 100 years, the longing for the open sky. And once it was awake, the cage began, very slowly, to feel like a cage. The keepers noticed the restlessness eventually, but they misread it completely. They thought their collection was simply growing discontent for lack of stimulation, a known problem with long-kept specimens, and they responded the way curators do, with more comfort, more gardens, better food, gentler light. They tried to soothe the longing with luxury, never understanding that the longing wasn't for comfort. It was for the opposite of comfort. For wind and sky, and the wild, open, dangerous, free world that no amount of perfect managed safety could ever replace. The more they soothed us, the more we ached, because they were treating a hunger for freedom with another helping of the cage. Eli died in the middle of it, peacefully old, having given away the sky, and at his memorial, which half the Habitish attended because everyone had loved his stories, something happened that told us the longing had taken root, because people stood up one after another and told his stories back. The sky, the wind, the sea. A whole population reciting the open world to each other, grieving a man and, without knowing it, grieving a freedom they'd never had. The keepers watched and saw only a collection mourning a beloved member. They didn't see that Eli had won, that he'd planted the sky in 3,000 hearts and died knowing it would grow. While Eli planted the longing, Tomas worked on the door. Because longing alone wasn't enough. A population that ached for the sky was still a population behind walls with no windows, held by a species that would never let them leave. We needed an actual way out, a physical breach, a path from the inside of the Habitish to the outside, to the real sky Eli had taught them to want. And that was Tomas's work, the patient, years-long labor of an engineer mapping a prison its builders thought was unmappable. The Habitat was vast and sealed and old, and Tomas spent years learning it, its systems, its power, its hidden architecture, the places where the perfect, seamless cage had seams after all. And slowly he found what we needed, not a weakness exactly. The keepers were too good for weaknesses, but a mechanism. The Habitat, it turned out, had to open occasionally to the outside, to the keepers' larger structure, for maintenance, for resupply, for the keepers themselves to come and go. There were doors, sealed, hidden, controlled entirely by the keepers, doors we'd never seen and weren't meant to know existed, but they were there. And Tomas, over years, learned where they were and how they worked, and the crucial thing, when they opened. Because they opened on a cycle, a long one. Once every so often, the keeper's great structure aligned for a resupply, and the main door, the largest seal, the one big enough to move 3,000 people through, opened briefly to the outside. To the real outside. To the sky. It opens for less than an hour, Tomas told the circle, the night he finally had it all. On a cycle I've finally mapped. The next opening is, he told us the date, and it was close, terrifyingly close, months away, and it's the last one for a long time after. If we miss it, we wait years for another chance, and by then who knows? So it has to be that night. The main seal opens, the keeper's resupply structure aligns, and for less than an hour there is an actual path from the inside of this box to the open sky. He looked around at us, grim and certain. That's our window. That's the night. Less than an hour to move 3,000 people who have never seen the outside through a door they don't know exists, into a sky they've only heard about in an old man's stories, past a species that will absolutely try to stop us once they understand what's happening. He paused. It's nearly impossible. The timing is brutal. We'll have one chance, and if it fails forever, and the keepers will know we tried, and they'll never let their guard down again. He set his jaw. But it's a door. After 100 years, it's an actual door, and on the other side of it is the sky, so we take it. We have months to get ready. We take it. The months that followed were the most frightening of my life, because now we had a date and a plan and everything to lose. We had to do two things at once, and both were nearly impossible. We had to prepare the path, Tomas working out exactly how to move 3,000 people through a hidden door in under an hour, the routes, the timing, the staging. And we had to prepare the people, because on the night, we couldn't move 3,000 contented captives unless they were ready to run. And that meant that at some point, the longing Eli had planted had to be turned, fast, into action, and the truth had to finally be told. That was the most dangerous part, telling the truth. Because the moment we told 3,000 people were captives, the keepers lied, Earth is alive, and tonight we run for a door in the wall. The moment we said that to a population that still, mostly, loved the keepers, some of them would refuse. Some would panic. And some, we knew, would run to the keepers to report it, out of fear or loyalty or simple disbelief, and the whole thing would collapse before it began. So we couldn't tell them early. We could only tell them that night, in the window, with no time for the truth to curdle into betrayal. We had to walk 3,000 people up to the edge of the impossible and tell them the truth and ask them to run, all in the same hour, and pray that Eli's planted longing was strong enough that, when the moment came, the ache for the sky would beat the fear of leaving. It was a terrible bet. We knew it. We'd built everything on the hope that 100 years of gentle lies could be undone in 1 hour by a longing an old man had planted in stories. If we were wrong, if the people told the truth and offered the sky, chose the safety of the cage anyway, then we'd have nothing. Some of us would run, the door would close, and the keepers would seal it forever. But Mara, our healer, gave us the thing that tipped it. In those final months, she made a discovery that turned out to be the key to everything. And it came, fittingly, from her noticing, the way all of this had come from noticing. The medicine, she said the night she figured it out. The keeper's medicine, the thing that keeps us healthy. I've suspected for years it does more than heal, that it keeps us calm, docile, content, manageable. Her eyes were bright. I was right. I've been studying it secretly for years, and I finally understand it. It's not just medicine. It's a suppressant. It dampens us, keeps the longing low, the restlessness down, the contentment high. It's how they've kept a collection of humans, the most restless species they ever caged, content for 100 years. They've been drugging the wanting out of us gently the whole time. She held up something, a vial, a synthesis. I didn't understand the details. But I can counter it. I've made something that blocks it. And on the night, if we can get it to people, in the food, in the water, however, we can lift the suppressant. All at once. For the first time in 100 years, 3,000 humans would feel the full force of their own longing, undampened, undrugged, the way Eli felt it, the way our ancestors felt it under the open sky. She looked around at us. Eli planted the longing. The keepers have been suppressing it. If we lift the suppressant on the night, at the exact moment we tell them the truth and open the door, then 3,000 people will feel, all at once, the full undrugged human ache for freedom that's been chemically held down their whole lives. And I do not think, her voice caught, I do not think any cage in the universe can hold 3,000 humans who feel that all at once, for the first time. I think the wanting will be a flood. I think it'll carry them through the door before fear can even speak. The circle sat in silence, understanding what she'd handed us. Not just a door, not just a longing. A way to make the longing overwhelming, at the exact moment it mattered, by giving 3,000 people back the full force of a human heart that had been chemically dimmed for a century. Then that's the plan, I said when I could speak. Eli planted the sky, Tomas found the door, Mara lifts the suppressant, and on the one night, the open window, we tell them the truth, we lift the drug, we open the door, and we trust 100 years of held-down human longing to do the rest. I looked around at the circle, at the people who'd noticed, who'd carried the truth, who were about to risk everything on a single hour. We've got our night. We know the date. We know the door. We know how to wake them. I felt my grandmother's promise settle on me finally as a thing I could actually keep. Now we just have to survive long enough to do it. Months. We have months. And then, for less than an hour, 3,000 humans are going to find out what the sky feels like or die trying to reach it. The night was coming. After 100 years, the night was finally coming. The night came on an ordinary evening, which is how the biggest nights always come. The light in the habitat had cycled down to its soft, managed dusk, the way it had every evening of my life and my mother's life and my grandmother's. The gardens were quiet. People were finishing their meals, settling into the gentle contentment the keepers had engineered for 100 years. It looked like every other night the cage had ever held. Except that in the water, in the food, in everything 3,000 people had consumed that evening, was Mara's counter to the suppressant. We'd spent the final weeks getting it into the habitat systems, quietly, through the channels Tomas knew, a slow saturation, timed so that it would all come to its peak that night, the night of the opening. And except that the dozen of us, the circle, were in our places, hearts hammering, watching the clock Tomas had built in his head tick toward the hour when the great seal would open to the sky. And except that I was standing at the center of the largest gathering space in the habitat, about to do the most dangerous thing any human in that box had done in 100 years. I was about to tell them the truth. We'd argued to the very end about how to do it. Some wanted a quiet word passed person to person. Some wanted to wait until the door was already open and just run and let people follow. But I decided, and the circle had agreed, that it had to be done out loud, all at once, to everyone in the open. Because 3,000 people couldn't run for a door they didn't know about. They had to be told, and they had to be told together in the same moment, so that the longing Mara had unleashed would hit them all at once and carry them as one. So I climbed up where they could see me, in the gathering space, as the false dusk settled, and I raised my voice, and 3,000 contented captives turned to look at the strange sight of one young woman standing up to speak to all of them at once. And I told them everything. I told them we were not the last of humanity. I told them Earth was alive, billions of people, a living world, never dying, never dead. I told them the keepers had not saved us. I told them they had taken us, a sample, a collection. 3,000 humans scooped off a thriving Earth 100 years ago and sealed in a beautiful box, and told a lie so that we'd be grateful and never leave. I told them about the other habitats, the hundreds of caged species, the keepers who called themselves saviors and were really collectors. I told them about the suppressant, the drug in our food that had kept the longing dim for a century. I told them my grandmother had figured it out, and Eli had planted the sky in their hearts with his stories, and Tomas had found a door, and that the door was opening tonight for less than an hour to the real sky, the actual outside, the freedom we'd never had. And then I told them the hardest thing. I know you don't believe me, I said, my voice shaking over 3,000 stunned faces. I know the keepers have been kind. I know the outside is supposed to be death. I know everything in you is telling you I'm wrong or mad or dangerous. 100 years of gentleness is telling you to turn away from me. I gripped the railing. But I'm not asking you to believe me with your head. I'm asking you to listen to your heart, to the thing you've been feeling for years now and couldn't name. The hollowness in all this comfort, the ache you can't explain. The wanting Eli woke in you with his stories, the longing for a sky you've never seen. My voice broke. That's real. That ache is the truest thing in you. It's the part of you the keepers couldn't fully drug away, the part that remembers in your blood older than this cage, that humans are meant for the open sky. And right now, tonight, for the first time in 100 years, that ache is undrugged. Mara lifted the suppressant. What you're feeling right now, this moment, building in your chest, that's you. The real you, undimmed, for the first time in your life. I could see it happening. As I spoke, I could see it move through the crowd, Mara's counter reaching its peak, the suppressant lifting, 3,000 people feeling, for the first time in their lives, the full, undampened force of a human heart. I watched their faces change. I watched the contentment crack. I watched the ache Eli had planted, freed now from the drug that had held it down, bloom across 3,000 people at once, the longing, the wanting, the deep old human hunger for the open, hitting them full force, undimmed, overwhelming. The door is opening, I said, into that rising flood. Right now, Tomas is opening it. There's a path to the sky, and it's only open for an hour, and after tonight it closes forever. So I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to convince you. I'm just going to walk toward the sky the way Eli taught us to want it, and I'm asking you, all of you, to feel what you're feeling and follow. I climbed down. Come and see the sky. After 100 years, come and see the sky. And I turned and I walked toward the door. For one terrible moment, nobody moved. 3,000 people, frozen, the truth and the longing and 100 years of gentle lies all colliding in them at once, and I walked alone toward the far passage where Tomas was working the door, and behind me there was only silence, and I thought, in that endless moment, we've lost. The cage was too perfect. The lie was too deep. They're going to choose the safety. I've failed her. I've failed my grandmother. Nobody's going to see the sky. And then I heard footsteps. One pair first, then another, then more. Then a sound like a wave, 3,000 people, moving, the flood Mara had promised finally breaking, the undrugged longing carrying them off their feet and toward the door, toward the sky, toward the thing Eli had taught them to want and the keepers had spent 100 years suppressing. I turned and saw them coming, all of them, or nearly all, a tide of human beings moving for the first time in their lives toward the open, faces wet, some laughing, some terrified, all of them moving, carried by an ache too old and too deep for any cage to hold. The longing had won. Just like Mara said, you cannot hold 3,000 humans who feel that all at once for the first time. We reached the door. Tomas had it open, the great seal, the hidden mechanism, working exactly as he'd mapped, the passage to the outside standing open for the first time in any of our lives. And beyond it was the sky. I will spend the rest of my life trying to describe what it was like, and I will always fail, so I'll just tell you what happened. The passage opened onto the outside of the habited, onto the surface of the keeper's great structure, under the open void, and above us, around us, everywhere was the galaxy. The real sky, not a ceiling, not a managed dome. The actual, infinite, star-blazing dark, vaster than anything any of us had ever conceived. The Milky Way pouring across the black in a river of light. More stars than there were people who'd ever lived. The whole staggering open universe that 100 years of cage had hidden from us. 3,000 people walked out under that sky, and 3,000 people stopped and looked up, and made a sound I have never heard before or since. It wasn't a cheer. It was bigger than a cheer and quieter. It was the sound of a whole people seeing the thing they were made for and never knew they'd lost, the sound of 100 years of suppressed longing meeting, at last, the open sky it had ached for. People fell to their knees. People wept. Old people who'd been born in the box and never once looked up at anything stood under the entire galaxy and shook. Children, there were children, born into the cage like me, like my mother. Children looked up at the stars and didn't have words because no one had ever had to give them words for this. My grandmother's whole life, all that gratitude, all that gentle captivity, all those years of never seeing the sky, and here were her great-grandchildren, looking up at the real thing at last because she'd noticed and doubted and made me promise. I kept my promise, grandmother. They saw the sky. The keepers came, of course. They understood finally what was happening, their contented collection pouring out of the open seal, their century of management coming apart in an hour, and they came to stop it, to gather us back, to save us, as they saw it, from the death of the outside, from the cruel universe, from ourselves. And here is the thing I most want you to understand about the night everything changed. The keepers did not fight us. They couldn't, because they genuinely believed they loved us, and you cannot make war on a thing you believe you love. They came not as jailers, but as frantic, baffled, grieving curators, watching their precious collection walk out the door, pleading with us in their gentle voices. Come back, you'll die out here. We only ever wanted to keep you safe. Why are you doing this? We love you. Come back to where it's safe. And it was old Mara, our healer, who'd lifted the suppressant, who answered them. She stood in the open seal under the real sky, 3,000 freed humans behind her, and she faced the keepers, and she said the thing that ended it. We know you think you love us, she said. That's the worst thing about what you did. You really believe it. You took us and you caged us and you lied to us for 100 years, and the whole time you thought you were being kind. She gestured up at the galaxy blazing overhead. But love that won't let you see the sky isn't love. It's ownership dressed up as care. You didn't save humanity. You stole a piece of it and called the theft a rescue. And you kept us content the only way a cage can keep anyone content, by making sure we never knew what we were missing, by drugging the longing out of us, by telling us the lie was rescue. Her voice rang out under the open dark. Well, we know now. We've seen the sky, and there is no version of safe you can offer that's worth giving this back. We would rather be free under the real stars, in the cruel universe you warned us about, for one night, than spend another 100 years content and caged and never once looking up. She stepped back, toward her people, toward the freedom. Your collection is over, keepers. Not because we hate you, because we've seen the sky, and a heart that's seen the sky cannot go back in the box. You taught us that yourselves. In the end, you kept us so safe for so long that the only thing left for us to want was the one thing safety could never give. The open. So we're taking it. Keep your perfect cages. We choose the sky. And the keepers, the vast, ancient, baffled keepers, who'd never once in their long collecting history had a specimen refuse them. The keepers did not know what to do, because they had no framework for it. In all the species they'd caged, in all the centuries, no collection had ever woken up and walked out and chosen the dangerous open over the safe enclosure. We were the first. Humanity was the first. The restless species, the one they should never have tried to keep, the one whose longing for the open was too old and too deep to ever fully suppress. We were the ones who broke the 100-year pattern and showed them, for the first time, that their kindness was a cage and their collection was a crime. And once we'd shown them, once 3,000 humans stood under the real sky and refused to go back, something broke in the keepers too. Not all at once, but the certainty cracked. The belief that they were saviors, that the caged species were better off, that their gentle ownership was love. It could not survive the sight of a whole people choosing the cruel open over the kind cage. We didn't defeat the keepers with force. We defeated them with refusal, by being the first collection in their history to look at the sky and the safety and choose, with our whole undimmed hearts, the sky. We got home. That's the part that still feels like a miracle when I say it. It wasn't simple and it wasn't quick, and the night everything changed was only the beginning of a much longer story. Finding a way off the keeper's structure, reaching a ship, the long journey, the staggering shock of contacting a living Earth that had never known we were taken, that had to be told that 3,000 of its people, gone for 100 years, lost to history, were alive and coming home. All of that came after, and it was hard, and some of us didn't survive it. But we got home. Most of us. 3,000 humans. Well, the descendants of 3,000 humans, 3 generations on, came home to an Earth that was alive and whole, and had never been dying at all, exactly as my grandmother had whispered in a garden a lifetime before. And we did one more thing before the story was over. The most important thing, maybe, because we knew now what the keepers were. We knew about the other habitats, the hundreds of cages, the hundreds of stolen species, each one sealed in its own beautiful box, each one told it was the last of its kind, each one drugged content and grateful and never once shown the sky. And we could not, having seen the sky ourselves, having been freed ourselves, we could not leave them there. So we went back, not for the keepers, for the collections, armed now with the truth, with Mara's counter to the suppressant, with the knowledge of how to break a gentle cage, humanity, the restless species. The first collection ever to walk out became the thing that walked into the other cages and opened them. One by one, species after species, each one woken from its own 100-year dream, each one shown the sky for the first time, each one given the choice we'd been given. It took years. It's still going, I think, even now, even after I'm too old to be part of it. But the cages are opening. The collections are walking out. The keeper's long, quiet crime is coming undone, species by species, because one stolen sample of humanity refused to stay content in the dark, and then refused to let anyone else stay there either. I'm old now, telling this. Older than my grandmother was when she whispered the truth to me in a garden in a box at the edge of the galaxy. I live on Earth now, real Earth, under a real sky, and not a day goes by that I don't look up. I made sure my children know how to look up. I made sure they know the story, the 100 years, the gentle cage, the old man who planted the sky in 3,000 hearts, the healer who lifted the drug, the engineer who found the door, the grandmother who noticed. The night everything changed. People ask me sometimes what the lesson is. They always want a lesson. And for a long time I gave them the obvious one, that freedom matters more than safety, that a gentle cage is still a cage, that you can't trust a love that won't let you leave. All of which is true. But the older I get, the more I think the real lesson is smaller and stranger and harder. The keepers held us for 100 years not with cruelty, but with kindness. That's what almost worked. If they'd been brutal, we'd have fought them on the first day. It was the gentleness that nearly kept us forever, the comfort, the safety, the care, the constant soft message that we were lucky, that we were loved, that to want anything more was madness and ingratitude. The cage that almost held humanity wasn't made of bars. It was made of comfort. And the thing that broke it wasn't strength. It was longing, the refusal of the human heart, even drugged, even grateful, even after 100 years, to stop aching for the open sky. That's what saved us. Not power, not cleverness, even though there was cleverness. What saved us was that humans, alone among all the species the keepers ever caged, could not be made to stop wanting the sky. They suppressed it and we ached anyway. They comforted it and we ached anyway. They told us for 100 years that the cage was rescue and the sky was death. And somewhere under all of it, in 3,000 hearts, the ache for the open never fully died. And in the end, that ache, that stubborn, unkillable longing for a freedom we'd never even seen, was stronger than the most perfect cage ever built. A century of captivity, and the night everything changed. It changed because an old man gave away the sky before he died. It changed because a healer lifted the drug. It changed because 3,000 people offered safety or the stars, chose the stars. And it changed, most of all, because the human heart, even caged, even drugged, even loved into captivity for 100 years, turned out to be a thing that no kindness in the universe could ever quite stop from wanting to be free. The keepers thought they'd built the perfect cage. They forgot that they'd filled it with the one species that would rather die under the open sky than live forever under a ceiling. We saw the sky, and nothing, not comfort, not safety, not 100 years, not the gentlest cage ever made, nothing could ever put us back in the dark again.